Imran Khan, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. We speak a month after the collapse of the Afghan government and the takeover of the Taliban. How would you describe the situation in Afghanistan today?
I think it's worrying. Afghanistan is on a historic crossroads. One, if it goes well, and we pray that this works in the direction of peace after 40 years in Afghanistan, if this Taliban hold all of Afghanistan, and if they can sort of now work towards an inclusive government, get all the factions together, Afghanistan could have peace after 40 years. But if it goes wrong, and which is what we are really worried about, it could go to chaos, the biggest humanitarian crisis, a huge refugee problem, unstable Afghanistan, and the reason why the US came in was to fight terrorism or international terrorists. So unstable Afghanistan, refugee crisis, and the possibility of, again, terrorism from Afghanistan soil.
You have said that a positive outcome for Afghanistan would be an inclusive government. Would you call this an inclusive government? Do you support it?
Well, let me just, Becky, explain to the viewers that my party came into power after 22 years. So 22 years we stayed in opposition before we came to power. When we got into power, there was so much pressure for us to include those people who had struggled for 22 years. So they almost had felt that it was a right that they should be included. So I can see the problems they are facing, but I do not think that there would be really peace in Afghanistan unless there's an inclusive government, because Afghanistan is a society composed of different ethnic groups. So the Pashtun is only about 45–50%. They are Tajiks, they are Hazara, they are Uzbeks. So unless it's an inclusive government, the worry is that there will be instability later on.
Well, it's not. It's not an inclusive government at present. Let's agree on that. Afghanistan, you said, had broken the, quote, shackles of slavery when the Taliban took back power. That doesn't sound like the statement of someone who shares the concerns of so many in the world about the future of Afghanistan and its people under the Taliban, notorious for its misogyny, its violence against women, that shows no evidence or interest in guaranteeing basic human rights, particularly those for women. But let's just talk about its makeup.
So it has to be put in its context. What was the context? I spoke. We were, for the first time in history, in 74 history of Pakistan, we had what we called was trying to get rid of the colonial system of education. So colonial system of education was a tiny elite had this colonial English medium education, and the masses had another Urdu medium education. And this created two classes. And so for the first time, we had a unified curriculum in our history. And what I was trying to say was that mental slavery, which comes from the colonial form of education, is much worse than physical slavery. The line I gave example of, in Afghanistan, they have got freedom. Now, I never quite understood what was the issue behind it, because when the British left, it was freedom for Afghanistan. When the Soviets left, it was freedom. So when the US leave, what am I supposed to say?
This interim government is not an inclusive government. The concerns of so many around the world are for the future of Afghanistan and its people under a Taliban government which is notorious for its misogyny and its violence again, and it lasted 5 years. So how concerned are you? And what are you going to do about it?
Look, Becky, where Afghanistan goes from here, I'm afraid none of us can predict. We can hope and pray that there's peace after 40 years, that the Taliban, what they have said, that they want an inclusive government, they want women rights in their own context, they want human rights, they've given amnesty. So far what they have said, clearly they want international acceptability. They did not go for international acceptability when they were between 1996 to 2001. This time, clearly they're making the statements where they want this acceptability. So we should try and incentivize them in that direction. But there's another fallacy. Afghanistan cannot be controlled by outside. They have a history. No puppet government in Afghanistan is supported by the people. It gets discredited amongst the people. So rather than sitting here and thinking that we can sort of control them, we should incentivize them. Because Afghanistan, this current government, clearly feels that without international aid and help, they will not be able to stop this crisis. So we should incentivize them, push them in the right direction.
If it seeks legitimacy, it will need to show evidence that it shares the values of those that it is seeking legitimacy for, and that being the West, for example. I grew up watching you as a star of Pakistan's cricket team. The Taliban have said that women shouldn't play cricket. In fact, they've said women shouldn't be involved in sport at all. This is the sort of Taliban that we are seeing today. Do you support that? I mean, women have been protesting about more inclusivity, about their rights. We know women, first-hand experience, women are too frightened to come out of their homes. They're too frightened to go to the workplace if they're allowed at all. They've been flogged. I mean, do you support their cause?
Look, Becky, first of all, let us just compare what happened after the Soviets left in 1989 and compare to what the situation is right now when the US has departed from Afghanistan. When the Soviets left in 1989, the sort of bloodbath took place. Over 200,000 Afghans died in that bloodbath. Now compare that to what has happened now. Frankly, I mean, we were all relieved. We expected a bloodbath. When Ashraf Ghani said that he left Afghanistan because he was scared of a bloodbath in Kabul, well, it could have happened. We were worried that when the US departed, there would be complete chaos in Afghanistan, a civil war. Our intelligence agencies told us that the Taliban would not be able to take over all of Afghanistan. And if they tried to take over Afghanistan militarily, there would be a protracted civil war, which is what we were scared of, because we are the ones who would suffer the most. So therefore now, in that, bearing in mind what could have happened and what has happened, I feel give them time. I feel very strongly that it's a mistake to think that someone from outside will give Afghan women rights. Afghan women are strong. Give them time. They will get their rights.
Audio Jungle.